This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Gerry Duggan and David O'Sullivan. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek, and on this show I talk with Gerry Duggan and David O'Sullivan. The first issue of their new Image comic series, Analog, has just been released, and I have an informative conversation with the creative duo about their collaboration. But before we listen to that, I want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are anywhere from 20 to 35% off the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off the cover price, sometimes 50% off cover, but every now and again you can find discounts that go higher than that. And if you go to dcbservice.com right now, you'll find issue number 3 of Analog at 40% off of the cover price. You can also find a variety of other comics penned by Gerry Duggan at similar discounts. You can pre-order his Guardians of the Galaxy Omnibus at 50% off of the cover price. And you can get trade volumes of his Deadpool, Nova, and Uncanny Avengers titles at 40% off of their cover prices. Any way you approach this, you really can't beat the prices at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com because they will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. Set in the not-too-distant year of 2024, Analog is a not-too-far-fetched look at what can come of information technology when it's fallen into the wrong hands. Its protagonist, Jack McGinnis, is a ledger man, an armed courier working freelance for individuals and businesses who need to transfer information in the old-fashioned analog manner. You see, this is a world where the cloud has come crashing down and the quote-unquote security of the internet has been exposed as nothing more than fiction. Combining elements of sci-fi and noir narrative, Gerry Duggan and David O'Sullivan have created a world, curiously enough, that smacks of the many events we see unfolding on the nightly news. Although they may not have fully anticipated the inroads of Mueller's Russian investigation, the ongoing revelations of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, or the various security breaches we learn about on almost a daily basis, Gerry and David, along with the help of colorist Jordi Belair, have established a premise that just may be the logical conclusion to what we're witnessing now. In this interview, I talk with the two about the genesis of this series, their process of collaboration, the injection of both noir and humor elements, and the various narrative questions established in this first issue. It was a fun conversation, and I want to share that with you now. I'm really pleased to have on the Comics Alternative Gerry Duggan and David O'Sullivan. They are the writer and artist of the new Image series, Analog. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, the first issue of Analog comes out this week, so depending on when people listen to that, they may already have read this first issue of Analog. But for those who may not have, and maybe they haven't read a solicit, I mean, how would you encapsulate Analog to the uninitiated?
Well, it's a piece of speculative fiction, but it really is at its core. We're just trying to have some fun in a near future when we can get rid of mobile phones out of characters' hands. And, this is a place and a time in the world when the internet is not a secure place that you would ever transmit a secret. And, a business has sprung up around that. Men and women called ledger men or paper jockeys move secrets. And so it's a fun return to, the noir films of old, men with briefcases and guns, but in our near future. And it is unfortunately aging like a very fine wine at the moment, as Cambridge Analytica, has been revealed, to have stolen so much data from Facebook. So there are a lot of sort of big ideas, but at its core, we are, I think, trying to tell a fun story about some damaged characters in a damaged world.
Yeah, one of the things I was struck by is how timely Analog, at least from this first issue, seems to be. Now, granted, a lot of the stuff that's been going on recently, the past year and a half or so, you're aware of, you anticipated, and kind of you baked it into Analog. On the other hand, there's certain things that you may have guessed could have happened, but there's no way you would have anticipated the specifics. In particular, what you mentioned, Gerry, the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook fiasco that has erupted just over the past week.
Yeah, it's we sort of wanted it to, I think, hang out in left field a little bit before sort of, becoming of the moment. We're just trying to tell our story and have some fun. But I think things like this were inevitable. For a few years now, there's been I'm not sure who said this the first time about, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. And, I think that there's going to be further revelations about the way that our democracy was subverted. I don't think it's going to be good news for Twitter, for Facebook or Google. Now as Zuckerberg has to go talk to Congress, we present an extreme in the comic, but that's, I think, where good drama lives. We amped some things up, and there is still an internet in our world, but you just wouldn't use it for any reason, beyond maybe pornography or simple messaging. But you wouldn't, knowing what they know now in this world, after a mass doxing, just no sensible person would transmit secrets. And it's a big opportunity for us to play, with some hard-boiled characters in a new messed up world. And I love, I don't know about you guys, I know David a little bit, but the watching old noir films, and any excuse to be able to sort of find a reason to make that forward looking has been a lot of fun.
Now, you mentioned just a second ago the great doxing, and that's something that comes up in this first issue, but it's never explained. I think people can gather what might be the case. I mean, what is the great doxing? They can start to put the pieces together, but how much of what you're calling in this first issue the great doxing can you reveal now?
Well, I think we don't necessarily drive by it, but we don't get into the nuts and bolts of how it happened. We sort of date it, and we say things like the cloud came crashing to Earth, and we know how it happened in the story because Jack was in its orbit. Our one of our lead characters, Jack McGinnis, had a role to play in it, and I think. As hurtful as it could be for some individual people, the idea that we sort of rip the wires out of our society, is ultimately explored as a good idea. in this book. I think there are some days, that working on this book, it seems like the world of analog is a dream, and then other times it seems like a nightmare. And so that's been really fun to write stories for characters that have such a different that live in such a different world. Even though we're writing stories about planet Earth, we're writing stories about people, but that it is a much different world. And really, while we talk about world, we will be able to explore how different cultures have embraced analog. We'll go around the world, and that's one of my favorite parts too.
So what is the genesis of this series? I mean, how did you come up with the idea? Is this something that, David and Gerry, you guys were thrown around together and then just decided to go ahead and take the plunge with this? Or did one of you have maybe a nagging interest to confront technology in this way?
We were introduced by Declan Shalvey. It was back in 2015 now. I couldn't believe that David hadn't been published yet. He showed me some pages, and I leapt at the chance to do a creator-owned book with him. I'd had the seed of the idea for analog for a while. I don't make my living in tech. I'm sort of tech adjacent, but I like to try and stay as current as I can on a lot of this stuff. I had been reading a lot of science journals just for I find that that's interesting to do regardless of what you're writing. I think everyone should do that. But I have friends in tech, and they are setting their emails to auto delete every 30 days. And I find that fascinating. I'm sort of going the opposite way of going like, oh, I guess I need more Gmail storage for some email that I will never need to sort of sift through, but I can do it now. And they're expecting it. Do you know what I mean? Like they're sort of expecting at one point that the world will look like that, and that's why they're sort of setting the info dumps that they have. But selfishly, anytime you can get rid of a mobile phone or a computer for a character or your story, you're really doing whatever you're working on a huge favor. How many movies and books are your favorites that are ruined by giving them a mobile phone?
What about you, David? Are you suspicious, or do you have your doubts about social media, contemporary technology, in any way that kind of feeds into what we see playing out in analog?
I don't know. Like, I'm not suspicious of it. I think people kind of knew it was happening, and they've kind of agreed to it. So they pick and choose what to put up online. You kind of have to play it safe. But no, if it wasn't for the internet, I would have never met Gerry. I wouldn't be working on analog. So, and I get all my reference for work from Google. I use like even Google Maps to kind of look up locations that Gerry has given me for analog. So like it's a useful tool, but you just got to be careful with it.
So ironically, the internet and social media makes it possible for the two of you to work together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, but here are two tools using it as a tool. Do you know what I mean? We're and not that I don't think analog sort of casts any kind of judgment over anyone except maybe the sort of the tech overlords that, are trying to make this world into, like little fiefdoms. I think, we got rid of feudal lords a long time ago. I was sort of fascinated. I don't know if you guys heard this, that the housing crunch up in Silicon Valley is so bad now that like people are sort of living in Airstreams in the parking lots. And I get it. You're saving money. You have like a Airstream with a Tesla, but it's also like, isn't that kind of like a feudal existence, like a neo-feudal existence? I don't know. It's fascinating. living inside the castle. I'll be safe in the parking lot at Facebook. Barbarians.
You mentioned feudal territory. The one character that we see in this first issue of Analog that I guess appears to be the most ominous of anyone that we see is Alan Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And he's behind a particular platform, and you don't name it, and I don't know if you will ever name it, but I mean, reading this now, I could not help but think of Zuckerberg and Facebook given recent news.
I mean, look, it's my least subtle naming ever.
I know Oppenheimer. What better name to choose?
Again, like I think even he is kind of shocked at the reach and damage that will have been revealed. I get that sense.
Zuckerberg,
like I see pictures of him now, and he looks like he has a real 1,000-yard stare. And, look, don't forget, at its core, Facebook was a platform that was made to sort of stalk people at the school he went to. So you're like, yeah, I'm not surprised some not great things spun out of that, even if he didn't have, nefarious goals, it's obviously, it plays right into, the strengths of our enemies. They hostile foreign powers. That our enemies don't like to actually fight. They're winning the information war, and what a treasure trove Facebook is for anyone that's trying to, manipulate a conversation. And I hadn't used Facebook. In a real long time, and eventually, when I started making comics, I actually changed my name, because I was just sharing pictures of my son with like relatives that were out of state, and I didn't feel like the Deadpool fans really would. I can't make that choice for my son to become sort of a character in my career life, so I made it very private, and then I deleted it. And I'm not on Facebook anymore, either as a private individual or a comics creator. I still am on social media. I still use Twitter. I use Instagram, but by its definition now, Facebook feels like an overshare. I don't miss it, and I'm a little happier. Feels like it.
What about you, David? Do you have a Facebook account?
I do, but I don't think I've ever posted on it. I use it to stalk my friends.
That's the most David thing I've ever heard.
I've got it, and I think I've someone sent around one of those chain mails where you have to post some of your paintings or some of your artwork, 5 pieces of 5 pieces. And that's the only thing I've ever posted. I've never, I've got a 5-year-old son. I've never put up a photo of him on it. Same reason, I can't choose. Maybe in a couple of years' time, he'll want to do it himself, but I'm not going to put his photo up online.
Yeah.
And then Twitter and Instagram, I kind of recently started using them just because I want to work in comics, so I kind of have to.
Well, you guys were mentioning the ominous side of Analog, especially in the figure of Alan Oppenheimer and what he may represent. At the same time, you did mention that you don't really seem to cast judgment on technology or the analog world one way or another. And that's one of the things that really struck me about this first issue of Analog. I guess a couple things stand out here. One, this does take place in the future, because I think when our story opens, it's the year 2024, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And the great doc scene took place in 2020, and there is a flashback scene to this year, 2018, right before things went amiss, before the cloud came falling down, so to speak. And even though this does take place in the relatively not too distant, I guess, future, there's something about this story that is very familiar. So it's speculative, it takes place in the future, but outside of a few visual indicators here or there, this could be the exact same world that we're living in today, it seems to me.
Yeah, I hope so. It feels like we're a little bit more run down then than we are now, and I mean that sort of physically and spiritually. But yeah, it is. Look, the election did change the story. I think it affected scripts sort of that were coming in hot, but then also the work that I'd already done, where I worked with David to rejigger a few things to sort of almost account for it, but without writing to it, if that makes any sense. We're not. This isn't a political book in the sense that we jumped over this the political era that we're in, and we sort of are landing in another era, and the era that is beyond, right, is still it's still America. It's still a violent place. People still have guns, and we're our character who did have something to do with the Great Doxing has found a way to survive in a new era. He was working for the establishment. It was his assignment to go to Silicon Valley to embed himself at the company. And then, how much of what happened after that is actually, was part of his task, and how much he went off the reservation. We'd like to play pretty close to the vest. But, it's been a fun world to explore, even though I don't think the characters would describe it as fun. It's sort of our job to hurt these characters and bend them a little bit and see how far we can make them uncomfortable before they start to break down.
Well, along with that, another thing that really struck me about this first issue is its tone. It didn't come across as that dark of a time. I don't want to say that it was optimistic, but it wasn't pessimistic. At least that's what I came away with from this first issue. And, I couldn't help but think of Brian K. Vaughan and Martin Martin's The Private Eye. Now, that is a much darker narrative that uses a somewhat similar premise, that the net or the cloud has come crashing down and it's, dramatically changed everyone's life. In Analog, I don't get that dark of a feel, at least from this first issue.
I feel like people are a little bit more resilient than, look, that book is great, but this sort of, we wanted to change the world and put a briefcase in one hand and a gun in the other, and then sort of explore how people have adapted to it. And I think you're right. Look, if everything was doxed today, the sun will still rise tomorrow. And, that's a fact. Yes, there would be some truly horrible stories, but, look, I think there'd be some good stories too. I mean, we have a character named Una who will be introducing properly in future issues. She's in the first issue. Watching over Jack, but her story, the Great Doxing begins a good story for her. It was for her liberating, and that's the fun of this. Is it's the wheel of fortune, right? As it turns and spins in a way that is beneficial to some people, it's crushing other people. And so, and I think too, the first issue isn't really as funny as some people might expect, that like something that I would work on would try to be, but there are sort of funny ideas. And I think that there's, a lot, it gets a bit funnier as it goes, as you watch to see like how the NSA pivots to an analog world, and how funny it looks and seems. I guess I don't want to spoil it too much, but in future issues, we'll see that, life is ridiculous. And so sometimes it looks ridiculous.
Well, how much of a back and forth do the two of you have in the creation of the storyline? I mean, is it strictly, Gerry, you write, and then David, you illustrate what Gerry's given you, or David, do you have feedback on the story that Gerry sent you, and then there's some adjustments going back and forth between the two of you?
No, in general, Gerry would just give me the script and I would illustrate it. But then he would do a second pass over it that would really tighten the script and make it even funnier in moments. And, like he really tightens the whole storyline. But no, it would be generally Gerry's idea and then I would just draw it out.
And what David was talking about, the thing that I love about comics so much is the collaboration. So I often am very dissatisfied with my own work once I see the boards back. And so in a perfect world, you have some time to think about it and to make some notes. And, sometimes the perfect balloon just appears. And sometimes, the perfect balloon for a panel that needs it is a struggle until the week it prints. But I'd like to think that we find it somewhere. But that back and forth is what I love. So it always comes back better. And then it's up to me to sort of raise my game to for the balloons and the boxes and anything that you read. And I hate wasting our letterer's time. Joe Sabino is a great guy, and I respect what he does. And if I'm bugging him for changes, it's because I really need that to happen. So I try to pick my spots and do that second pass, and it becomes a third pass and a fourth pass as we all sort of read the letters and figure out if there's something that we could do better. It's so funny. My son is very curious about making comics now, and he's 9. So he's getting some big ideas, and he gave me an idea for this, David, that I'll run by you later. That is a great idea, a standalone issue. Yeah, that made me really happy that he sort of got the world, and also it's a thing that I like talking to him about outside of just the idea of hoping to help him set down a path that leads to something creative, whatever it is. But it's also, I want to try to put into him the idea that it's okay to be a little mysterious. As parents, I'm trying to explain to him that, like, everyone makes mistakes growing up, and my mistakes weren't part of a permanent record the way that his could be. And so, I think we're raising some savvy kids. I guess I will always be surprised about how a kid could screw up, but he has asked for a YouTube channel because he's into games, and I'm like, what? Let's just wait a little while. And then the punchline to that, though, is like seeing these kids that are like, I make $500,000 a month playing Fortnite, and I'm, I'll throw my kid into YouTube, No, but that's just the nature of the world that we're living in, and I, Derek, to hear you say that you thought it was our world, that makes me happy, because it really is just supposed to be, if you could stretch our timeline just a little bit beyond what you could see, that this is the world that we inherit. But again, it's a work of fiction. Like I'm not. No one's trying to be Nostradamus. We just want to have fun, in a world where, a lot of stories get undone by modern conveniences, and boy, we're having fun.
Some of that fun comes out at various places. You mentioned the humor. People may not think that this is, or they may be looking for the humor as they do with some of your Deadpool stuff. I mean, I do think that there's humor nicely embedded at various places in this first issue. In the opening page, especially when we're first introduced to Jack McGinnis, and he mentions that he's in St. Louis and he hates that because every time he's there, someone tries to kill him. But when he says, I hate St. Louis, I couldn't help but think of the way that Apocalypse Now opens. Saigon. I'm still in Saigon.
Saigon. Yeah. So funny. Yeah. That's been a motif, I think. I remember working with Brian Posehn when I first broke into comics with Rick Remender and Hilary Barta on a story about Santa Claus after the apocalypse. I think it was Brian who said, "Oh yeah, he should dump maple syrup over him and punch a mirror." And I was like, "Yep, so of course he should."
Now, was that another Image title that you just referenced?
It was, yeah. That was a book that it still is really special to me. You know, it's a funny idea that Brian and I had that didn't exist until Rick came into our life. Rick was at the time writing and drawing for himself and for other people, and working like a million jobs. I think he was working on the Iron Giant back then, and sort of funneling anything that he was making into the creator-owned business to do things like Strange Girl and Sea of Red and Fear Agent and all the stuff that now feels like Big Giant works in the creator-owned space that were just sort of getting their sea legs back then, and so we were paying Rick to draw the pages, and he was sort of turning that into more comic books. It was, talk about a work ethic. Like, boy, Rick has it. Like those, I think were 18-hour days for a couple of years to get to where he is now. But yeah, and it's unfortunate. It ended up being the last thing that Rick could draw. He's just too busy now to sit down at a desk. But if you go back and look, boy, there's a lot of love in those pages.
So Gerry, this is not your first foray with Image, but David, this is your first time with Image, right?
It is, yeah. I've done a few issues with an Irish publisher, like a kind of small indie kind of comics. Before that, I worked in animation for about 9 years, TV stuff. So yeah, this is like my first kind of professional work.
And it's a creator-owned work.
Yeah, even better. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the only way that I'd get to work with David. Someone was going to come and steal him away after. So this is my big chance.
Well, how is it now working at Image, and how different it is from what you two guys are used to? David, you mentioned working with animation, and then, Gerry, you've done a lot of work, obviously, with Marvel, which is, I guess, light years different from what you see in Image.
Well, it is and it isn't, only in that, you still have to really, regardless of the company, you have to really give it like your all every time, because you never know just when it's going to all end. I said this last night, and I don't, and I mean it 100%. I drove Deadpool like a rental car. And I checked all the boxes with the insurance. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh, let's go over a curb. We treat it pretty rough. I think, there's a danger in sort of assuming that that there is a great difference, I think, between the companies, because I can't make someone not a fan of Deadpool or the Hulk, but I can make them not my fan. And so really every time out, I am sincerely just trying to, have fun and to make something that didn't exist that I myself would want to buy. And then I'll sleep like a baby. I will not, whether it is warmly received or not, as long as it was something I wanted to do, I can live with that. If we're true to ourselves, then good things will come out of it. And look, Image has been really wonderful. We've been at this sort of toiling for a long time, and now that we have basically that first trade completed, boy, I've been really happy with the response that we're getting from their PR, and they're getting us on the cover of Image Plus, and it's you can feel a lot of the work behind the scenes that is happening, and so I'm very grateful.
It's interesting what you just said, Gerry, because just the other day I was talking with Brendan Fletcher and Carl Kerschel about their new series, Isola. And one of the things that they mentioned was how thankful they were and how impressed they were in terms of the support that they've gotten from Image, especially on the promotional side, which is something that I think one or maybe both of them didn't anticipate.
Yep.
Originally, and I think that that's great. And I was telling them from my end, as someone in the media, I'm all the time getting notifications, emails, and whatnot from the PR people at Image, which actually is the reason why all three of us are talking right now. It's because of the efforts of the folks at Image.
We have, I think Image is about 30-ish people now in the office, and it feels like a much bigger force there, like a much bigger office, and that's because they're doing such great work. We're debuting this weekend. I'm at C2E2 in Chicago, and David has a cover of the book that's an exclusive just for the show, and so we're sort of using C2E2 as the coming out party for the book. And I have like a lot of interviews lined up, and I have I'm going to speak to the retailers. They're having a diamond summit there, and Image arranged that. And I'll be in Artist Alley if you're listening and you're in Chicago this weekend. Come say hi. I'll sign your podcast. But look, it's also for the fans. I don't spend any more or less time on a script. If it's got my name on it, like that's the I really have to. I'm compelled to do something that I would love. And so, and Image is really a place where everyone's books are labors of love. So I'm really excited, and I can't wait for that new book for Isola. Mm-hmm. Boy, that looks great. The expo this year had so many fun comics, like that the book that Rick has with Bengal looks amazing, and I read the first issue of Oblivion Song. It's going to be a fun couple of years, I think, in comics. And, look, I'm also very lucky in collaborators and assignments. Once again, I'm going to be doing, a big Marvel story this year. So I really do get to. It feels like I'm playing a festival, and I get to play a couple of different stages, and I couldn't be happier about that.
So you're saying that specifically for C2E2, David, you've done a special cover for Analog?
Yeah. Yeah, we just
he's just not invited to the party.
Yeah. I gotta wait outside. I'm not allowed in.
No, I'll get you in soon, David. It's like I'm leaning up.
I can hear Gerry doing all the different stages at the festival from outside though.
Oh yeah, it's I do. I feel like if we could have planned it a bit better, but David's got some work to do to finish up the first trade but I'll be at C2E2. Yeah, the cover is so cool. It actually, well, David, you talk about the cover.
Oh yeah, it's the main character Jack being shot at, but he's there's like a signpost, a street sign behind him, and it's the main street outside the building where the C2E2 actually takes place.
Oh, cool.
So, hopefully people will get that when they have it in their hands and they're walking across the road. But also hopefully they won't get knocked down.
Get it run over, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be an example of life imitating art.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid. Yeah, well, all the more reason I'm regretting not being able to go to C2E2 this year.
Yeah, I haven't been, so I'm really excited. I've gotten a really nice response. Seeing people excited about the book, and obviously the last couple of weeks as the world sort of creeps closer towards Analog, the excitement is building a little bit. And so, we had a few advance reviews go out that have been very positive too. And, I'm also, I used to work for a retailer. And so I'm trying to do everything I can to make it easy for them to sell a new book. I know sometimes, new creator-owned works can come out and feel like they get lost in some of the bigger stuff that's happening. So we're very grateful for the chance to talk to you, and hopefully I can do more things to keep analog visible so that we can get a steady a steady readership that will allow us to tell the maybe 2 or 3 trades worth of material. That's what we're sitting on.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that you guys were mentioning earlier, and that is the noir feel to this. Did you have the idea of giving analog a noir twist, an overt noir twist from the very beginning, or is this something that just came to you as you were thinking through over time this project?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about what makes a noir film and or a noir story or a noir comic, and I think it's not just that that you want like sort of luscious deep shadows. Visually there is a sort of a noir palette, but it's also and I'll be honest, and this is also sure it's a gag, but it's also a comment. At one point we're able to, in the is it the second or third issue, David, when we sort of view we get a window into American healthcare in 2024.
It's the third one.
It's the third one. So we go, we'll see, that we're at a veterinarian, but nobody has a pet. so we're, that feels like, that dark sensibility, the dark worldview sort of permeates Jack. He is a hard drinking, hard punching, operative, and he, when he gets hurt, he'll need to, actually, you know what, David, we forgot we plant that seed in the first issue.
In the first one, in the dentist.
Yeah. So, Jack has a trusted veterinarian that he can afford. We haven't figured out socialized medicine in analog.
I think the first one was a dentist, though, because I remember you asking me to draw I think I put posters of smiles and stuff in the background.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. So look, there is to me a great, I think I would even say that, The Dark Knight is a noir film, that's sort of an outside crazy one, but like Heat is a great modern noir, and then there are just brilliant older noir films. Like, one of my favorite movies ever is The Third Man. And so, that's the stuff I rewatch a lot. I also, this is a free secret for anyone that wants to do anything creative. I can't listen to music with lyrics or podcasts or television while I'm writing. You just have to commit to writing. And that way you can hear your characters speak and you can try and transcribe the dialogue. You got to get the voices out of your head. But I do have a TV in my office, and it's off if I'm writing. But if I'm answering emails or looking over art or doing any of the other stuff that comes along with being a small business owner, I throw the TV on, and I will throw a movie on, and then I'll mute the movie usually. And that's really when a film will reveal its secrets about how it's made and visually how it tells a story. And I think I get a lot out of that, out of watching, like old masters, or watching Scorsese, or watching any of my favorite movies, and seeing how that story unpacks is, I think, good. No bad can come of it if you guys want to try that with your favorite features.
Well, there is definitely something noir-like about analog, and not just in terms of noir film, but noir narrative in the larger sense, fiction and what have you. And many of the icons, visual and otherwise, are there. I mean, for instance, David, on the cover A that we have, we see an image of Jack McGinnis standing behind a tree with a gun. I mean, he has an overcoat. And so that is a fairly common image when it comes to noir or detective, at least visual narrative. And also we have his wisecracking, which again is another characteristic. And also there is the detached voiceover. You know, I mentioned at the beginning, it starts with, "I hate St. Louis." And we get this kind of commentary throughout. So, I mean, this is the difference between, you're talking about noir film. I guess a more contemporary example of noir is Blade Runner. And the big difference between the original and then the director's cut is that with the latter, they cut out that voiceover. But the first one, in some ways, had much more of a noir feel to it because of that voiceover.
Yeah, the Blade Runner is one that, right? It's a fun one to argue. I feel like Harrison Ford didn't like that narration, and so it's been a sticking point forever. But I know a lot of people that prefer it. Yeah, I Jack is narrating this story, and so you're right. It is one of the hallmarks of the genre.
You guys also pose quite a number of questions with this first issue, and in a good way. I mean, I do think that with the first issue of a series, there should be enough question to propel or, I guess, get the reader interested in what happens with issues number 2, 3, and so on and so forth. But if the questions are too nagging and if there are too many of them, people may get frustrated and not want to read on. But you guys pose questions in a great way. So, for instance, you're right. We do see on one page Una, but she doesn't say anything, and we really don't know her relationship with Jack. That's a big question mark.
Yep.
Another big question mark comes with the introduction of Jack's father. There's something about him, there's something about that relationship that strikes me as central in some way to this series, but I don't know what yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the big question behind the great doxing and Jack's part in it.
Yep. Those are some pretty big questions.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that will come back around in the first trade, and some of it becomes sort of our longer mythology through some flashbacks. Also, I one of the questions I think people will have after the first issue is what happened to Oppenheimer. So we'll see what happens. And then It's one of those things that's funny. I had always intended to try and introduce one of our antagonists in the first issue, which feels like, oh, that'd be good business. However, just in the unpacking of it all, I felt like we had enough in this first issue and enough people to meet, enough scenarios to establish that we could afford to not meet her until the second issue. And so, you're getting a lot of big puzzle pieces, and then there are some really large players that will still show up in this first trade paperback, and it's fun to. There are still a lot of surprises, I think, out there, even though we've hopefully revealed enough. We've opened our kimono enough to get everyone excited to continue to want to hang out with us.
Now, I know many times with Image comic series, this can be a little uncertain how long a series will run. But do you have at least an ideal length of how long we can expect Analog to go on for?
I don't know. I think we'll see. Obviously, part of that will be dictated by supply and demand, but part of it too will just be how much fun we continue to have. I think that there are ways that we can get through and survive the process of single issue comics to get to the trades, and that's really where. I think the Image, a lot of the Image comics get their traction is in trade sales, and I think will likely be no different. I'd be very happy to write the end at where we're talking about really is the third trade, maybe the fourth, but just having the opportunity to have gotten this out there, there is an ending in mind that we could move up or push back in great success, because there are a lot of places I'd like to visit in this. I love to travel. That I don't get enough to. I don't oftentimes have enough opportunity to do it, even with Comic Cons. I try to always at least do 1 or 2 shows a year in a new place that I haven't been. And Analog is it's like remote viewing into the future for us. We're in Tokyo in the first trade, and we're in New York and St. Louis, and I have a really fun story in Phoenix, but that doesn't quite fit yet in where our story is now. I need the story to progress a little bit. So it's a fun thing. It's telling serialized. We're the last people doing serials, right? Like publishing comic books. Feels like this very special thing that you might get told you have 6 more issues or 60 more issues, or you might get told, hey, we got to wrap this up, we have 1 more issue. And that's been true regardless of where who you're publishing with. Excuse me.
Now, we were talking earlier about the politics that is sitting right underneath this first issue of Analog. Will we see politics, if not directly, then at least subtly in the storyline to come?
I don't think in the way that anyone would really expect. I think it's I feel it in the background. The choices that we make politically and sort of the world that we get out of it, but I'm not really interested in exploring the direct politics of the world, because I think we have enough of that in our everyday life, in our news, in other entertainment that by its nature has to comment on it. And so at its core, I think we're we remember we're still entertainment. And so even though that this is can be a little dark, I know that we're still entertaining. And so I don't want to really mix I don't want to cross the streams, to borrow from Ghostbusters, as I often do. I feel like we're in the right spot, telling the right story that we have to tell, that we're excited about telling, that feels vital. And I don't want to bog it down with that. I also think, in a weird way, like we jump over the political situation that we're in, but we sort of land squarely in the result of it. We have white supremacists in the streets now, and we have white supremacists in the streets later in Analog. I don't necessarily see some of the more emboldened people like that being deterred anytime soon.
Now, granted, Analog is just getting off the ground right now, but have the two of you anything in mind for a future project together?
I don't think David would ever work with me again.
Not at all. No, this has been so much fun.
Yeah, I don't think so, because we're, I would love to work with David. I'd do anything with him again. But, we do, right now, it's such a funny thing when we start talking about comics, and I mean everyone, like when, Carl's talking about his new comic, or we're talking about our new comic, or Rick is going out on the road to push the Bengal book. I feel like I'm talking about a secret that, only that has been shared amongst such a small group. We've been living with Analog for a couple of years. And so, even though it's brand new to everyone, this feels like, it's like Jack's jacket to us. It's a comfortable fit. And I hope we continue to be able to play in that space for a good long time. And if the time came and either it became economically not possible to publish the book anymore, or even better, the hope is, hey, we get to a place where we say, hey, this feels like the end. That would be ideal, but then pivot to something else. We'll tell a new story if David is still taking my calls.
Of course, always.
You know what? That actually happened though with Deadpool. The idea that I could write the end of the story that I had been telling or having helped telling for 5 years. Over in the Marvel work, we had a story unfolding in Captain America that would see a fascist doppelganger of Steve come to power that no one knew was any different for a good long time. And I fought this. I resisted it because I was like, I just did all this work to put Deadpool up alongside Cap. And then I sort of realized, I was like, oh my God, that's the third act. He's the guy that gets burned down worse than anyone. And Marvel was totally cool with it. So, I mean, like, getting to write the end in a comic book sometimes is like, that's like your white whale, and it's easier to do in a creator-owned space, obviously. But having a beginning, a middle, and an end, boy, that feels right. And so there is an end to Analog. We're just trying to figure out how squishy the middle is.
Well, what can you tell me about maybe another project that each of you may be working on separately, or maybe with other people? Again, don't want you to give away any secrets that publisher may get pissed off about. Right
now I have 2 Image comics that will be ongoing. One with David called Analog, and then one with John McCrae that is debuting later this year. That one's sort of my socialist screed. That one's my socialist manifesto. Is to look at that. One's not. That one's just a modern day story about a stick-up man, a robber, who gave up that life of crime out of love. And in a perfect world, that would have been the end. But unfortunately, he's returning to his life of crime also out of that same love. And that's just a sad and funny story that John is drawing the hell out of. And, look, to whatever extent it helps to have a hook where you can say, from the co-creator of Hitman and the idiot that wrote Deadpool, here's this new Image book. I think that it's a different gear of fun there, but I think you'd probably also have to classify that as a noir. And actually, I don't care. I'm not sure I'm supposed to say anything, but I guess I'm going to say it now. We'll have an ash can, full color ash can of the first issue at C2E2. So we're going to try to draft that success off the Analog success. It's neat to be able to, have so many things begin to pop at the same time, even though it represents like years of work. Over on the Marvel front, I've been writing Guardians for a couple of years now, and that story also has reached a fever pitch. So it's fun to have all of this show up at once. And, I think it gives people the wrong idea. Like, hey, how many hours a day are you working? And believe me, I'm working hard, but you're sort of seeing the fruit grow after many years of working hard.
Well, what about you, David? Are you working on another project right now or have plans in the near future?
No, I actually don't have any plans at the moment. I can only work on. I can only work on one book at a time. So, this is my big kind of moment. So I'm kind of concentrating on it, and then I'll wait for it to kind of stop before I'll kind of go looking for more.
So I guess that's a big difference between writers and illustrators in comics, whereas an illustrator usually works on or can work on, maybe more times than not, one title at a time. The writers can juggle 2 or 3 storylines.
True. It's funny you mentioned that. I've been thinking a lot about art recently, and my favorite thing about comics is the collaboration and the fun that I have making it, and the back and forth that we have while we're making it. And then I try generally not to have a relationship with it after it rolls off a printer. I try to just look forward, and I think artists have not a disadvantage, but you're right that the idea that I found my number. The number is 4. I like to write about a script a week, and look, that's a lot of work. Would I like it to be less? Sure, everyone would like to work less, but that's the number that I'm comfortable at. And I had a talk, I think it was with Ryan Stegman recently, who said, well, I don't want to be off of racks for that long. And it was the first time that anyone had sort of said to me, oh yeah, you know what? Sometimes artists have to sort of disappear in order to show up with new work. And, that I think was also a concern for Mike Hawthorne when we did an 80-page special of Deadpool in space. But, he sort of missed his Deadpool arc because of that. It's almost like getting a whole trade paperback in one go. And, fans for a couple of months are going, boy, where's Mike? Did he leave Deadpool? Is he, so it is, I feel like now it's a little bit easier where you can see people drawing on Instagram. And I'll watch Twitch stuff. And, I find it fascinating. Look, I got into comics because I was not talented enough to draw. It's sincerely like, I tried it. Took some classes as a kid, and everyone was like, "This is not going to work out." I very much appreciated that too. Where you go, "Oh, boy, that could have been bad." So, you're right. Our collaborators. I hope, David, you feel like you're, because look, you're the engine driving this. You and Jordy together make such a good team. Even though I'm out here in Los Angeles and trying to blab to people, I hope people do understand, David's the star of this show.
Yeah, sure I am. Well, I think we've got some great people working on it that have really helped. Even with Gerry's great writing, and then my art and Jordy's amazing colors. Then we have Joe Sabino lettering. The book looks incredible. Really good, and it's thanks to them too. So.
Really excited.
Yeah, it really is a great first issue, and I'm looking forward to see how the rest of the series plays out. David, Gerry, I want to thank the two of you for coming on and talking with me about your new series from Image Comics, Analog.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, I want to thank David O'Sullivan and Gerry Duggan for coming on the podcast and talking with me about Analog. The first issue of it is now out, so go get it and jump on board. And a great way of doing so is by checking out the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. There, you'll find the latest issue of Analog and a variety of other titles at incredible discounts. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with me and let me know what you thought about my talk with Gerry and David. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you could leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can contact us the old-fashioned way by picking up your phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're 2guys@comicsalternative.com, or you can contact me directly. I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com. And you can find us all over social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Spotify, on TuneIn, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to the website comicsalternative.com. We have a lot of great interviews lined up in the days to come, so be sure to check back for those. Until then, take care of yourselves.